Hello, my kiddos. It's Dad, and we are in chapter 1 of book 2. And Frodo just got away from the Black Riders because somebody caused the river to magically kind of swallow them up. So let's keep going. Frodo woke and found himself lying in bed. At first he thought that he had slept late after a long unpleasant dream that still hovered on the edge of memory. Or perhaps he had been ill? But the ceiling looked strange. It was flat, and it had dark beams richly carved. He lay a little while longer, looking at patches of sunlight on the wall and listening to the sound of a waterfall. "Where am I, and what is the time?" he said aloud to the ceiling. "In the house of Elrond, and it is 10 o'clock in the morning," said a voice. "It is the morning of October the 24th, if you want to know." "Gandalf!" cried Frodo, sitting up. There was the old wizard, sitting in a chair by the open window. "Yes," he said, "I am here, and you are lucky to be here too, after all the absurd things you have done since you left home." Frodo lay down again. He felt too comfortable and peaceful to argue, and in any case he did not think he would get the better of an argument. He was fully awake now, and the memory of his journey was returning. The disastrous shortcut through the old forest, the accident at the Prancing Pony, and his madness in putting on the ring in the dell under Weathertop. While he was thinking of all these things and trying in vain to bring his memory down to his arriving in Rivendell, there was a long silence, broken only by the soft puffs of Gandalf's pipe as he blew white smoke rings out of the window. "Where's Sam?" Frodo asked at length. "And are the others all right?" "Yes, they are safe and sound," answered Gandalf. "Sam was here until I sent him off to get some rest, about half an hour ago." "What happened at the ford?" said Frodo. "It all seemed so dim, somehow, and it still does." "Yes, it would. You were beginning to fade," answered Gandalf. "The wound was overcoming you at last. A few more hours and you would have been beyond our aid. But you have some strength in you, my dear hobbit, as you showed in the Barrow, which was touch and go, perhaps the most dangerous moment of all. I hope you could have held out at Weathertop. Oh, I wish you could have held out at Weathertop." "You seem to know a great deal already," said Frodo. "I have not spoken to the others about the Barrow. At first it was too horrible, and afterward there were other things to think about. How do you know about it?" "You have talked long in your sleep." "You have talked long in your sleep, Frodo," said Gandalf gently, "and it has not been hard for me to read your mind and memory. Do not worry. Though I said absurd just now, I did not mean it. I think well of you, and of the others. It is no small feat to have come so far, and through such dangers, still bearing the ring." "We should have never done it without Strider," said Frodo, "but we needed you. I did not know what to do without you." "I was delayed," said Gandalf, "and that nearly proved our ruin. And yet I am not sure. It may have been better so. I wish you would tell me what happened." "All in good time. You were not supposed to talk or worry about anything today, by Elrond's orders. But talking would not stop me thinking and wondering, which are quite as tiring," said Frodo. "I am wide awake now, and I remember so many things that want explaining." "Why were you delayed? You ought to tell me at least that." "You will soon hear all you wish to know," said Gandalf. "We shall have a council, as soon as you are well enough. At the moment, I will only say that I was held captive." "You?" cried Frodo. "Yes, I, Gandalf the Grey," said the wizard solemnly. "There are many powers in the world, for good or for evil. Some are greater than I am. Against some I have not yet been measured. But my time is coming. The Morgul Lord and his Black Riders have come forth. War is preparing." Then you knew of the riders already, before I met them? Yes, I knew of them. Indeed, I spoke of them once to you, for the Black Riders are the Ringwraiths, the 9 servants of the Lord of the Rings. But I did not know that they had arisen again, or I should have fled with you at once. I heard news of them only after I left you in June, but that story must wait. For the moment, we have been saved from disaster by Aragorn. Yes, said Frodo, it was Strider that saved us, yet I was afraid of him at first. Sam never quite trusted him, I think, not at any rate until we met Glorfindel. Gandalf smiled. I have heard all about Sam, he said. He has no more doubts now. I am glad, said Frodo, for I have become very fond of Strider. Well, fond is not the right word. I mean, he is dear to me, though he is strange and grim at times. In fact, he reminds me often of you. I didn't know that any of the big people were like that. I thought, well, that they were just big and rather stupid. Kind and stupid, like Butterbur, or stupid and wicked, like Bill Ferny. But then we don't know much about men in the Shire, except perhaps the Breelanders. You don't know much even about them if you think old Barleyman is stupid, said Gandalf. He is wise enough on his own ground. He thinks less than he talks, and slower, yet he can see through a brick wall in time, as they say in Bree. But there are few left in Middle-earth like Aragorn, son of Arathorn. The race of the kings from over the sea is nearly at an end. It may be that this War of the Ring will be their last adventure. Do you really mean that Strider is one of the people of the old kings? Said Frodo in wonder. I thought they had all vanished long ago. I thought he was only a ranger. Only a ranger, cried Gandalf. My dear Frodo, that is just what the rangers are, the last remnant in the north of the great people of the men of the west. They have helped me before, and I shall need their help in the days to come. For we have reached Rivendell, but the ring is not yet at rest. I suppose not, said Frodo. But so far my only thought has been to get here, and I hope I shan't have to go any further. It is very pleasant just to rest. I have had a month of exile and adventures, and I find that has been as much as I want. Excuse me, kiddos. He fell silent and shut his eyes. After a while he spoke again. I have been reckoning, he said, and I can't bring the total up to October the 24th. It ought to be the 21st. We must have reached the ford by the 20th. You have talked and reckoned more than is good for you, said Gandalf. How do the side and shoulder feel now? I don't know, Frodo answered. They don't feel at all, which is an improvement, but he made an effort. I can move my arm again a little. Yes, it is coming back to life. It is not cold, he added, touching his left hand with his right. Good, said Gandalf. It is mending fast. You will soon be sound again. Elrond has cured you. He has tended you for days, ever since you were brought in. Days? Said Frodo. Well, 4 nights and 3 days to be exact. The elves brought you from the ford on the night of the 20th, and that is when you lost count. We have been terribly anxious, and Sam has hardly left your side, day or night, except to run messages. Elrond is a master of healing. But the weapons of our enemy are deadly. To tell you the truth, I had very little hope, for I suspected that there was some fragment of the blade still in the closed wound, but it could not be found until last night. Then Elrond removed the splinter. It was deeply buried, and it was working inward. Frodo shuddered, remembering the cruel knife with notched blade that had vanished in Strider's hand. Do not be alarmed, said Gandalf. It is gone now. It has been melted, and it seems that hobbits fade very reluctantly. I have known strong warriors of the big people who would quickly have been overcome by that splinter, which you bore for 17 days. What would they have done to me? Asked Frodo. What were the riders trying to do? They tried to pierce your heart with a Morgul knife, which remains in the wound. If they had succeeded, you would have become like they are, only weaker and under their command. You would have become a wraith under the dominion of the Dark Lord, and he would have tormented you for trying to keep his ring. If any greater torment were possible than being robbed of it and seeing it on his hand. Thank goodness I did not realize the horrible danger, said Frodo faintly. I was mortally afraid, of course, but if I had known more, I should not have dared even to move. It is a marvel that I escaped. Yes, fortune or fate have helped you, said Gandalf, not to mention courage, for your heart was not touched, and only your shoulder was pierced, and that was because you resisted to the last. But it was a terribly narrow shave, so to speak. You were in gravest peril while you wore the ring, for then you were half in the Wraith world yourself, and they might have seized you. You could see them, and they could see you. I know, said Frodo. They were terrible to behold. But why could we all see their horses? Because they are real horses, just as the black robes are real robes that they wear to give shape to their nothingness when they have dealings with the living. Then why do these black horses endure such riders? All other animals are terrified when they draw near, even the elf horse of Glorfindel. The dogs howl and the geese scream at them. Because these horses are born and bred to the service of the Dark Lord in Mordor. Not all his servants and chattels are wraiths. There are orcs and trolls, there are wargs and werewolves, and there have been and still are many men, warriors and kings, that walk alive under the sun, and yet are under his sway, and their number is growing daily. What about Rivendell and the elves? Is Rivendell safe? Yes, at present, until all else is conquered. The elves may fear the Dark Lord, and they may fly before him, but never again will they listen to him or serve him. And here in Rivendell they live still some of its chief foes, the Elvenwise, lords of the Eldar from beyond the furthest seas. They do not fear the ring-wraiths, for those who have dwelt in the Blessed Realm live at once in both worlds, and against both, the seen and the unseen, they have great power. I thought I saw a white figure that shone and did not grow dim like the others. Was that Glorfindel then? Yes, you saw him for a moment as he is upon the other side, one of the mighty of the Firstborn. He is an elf lord of a house of princes. Indeed, there is a power in Rivendell to withstand the might of Mordor, for a while, and elsewhere other powers still dwell. There is power too of another kind in the Shire, but all such places will soon become islands under siege if things go on as they are going. The Dark Lord is putting forth all his strength. Still, he said, standing suddenly up and sticking out his chin, while his beard went stiff and straight like bristling wire. We must keep our courage. You will soon be well if I do not talk you to death. You are in Rivendell, and you need not worry about anything for the present. I haven't any courage to keep up, said Frodo, but I am not worried at the moment. Just give me news of my friends and tell me the end of the affair at the ford, as I keep on asking, and I shall be content for the present. After that, I shall have another sleep, I think, but I shan't be able to close my eyes until you have finished the story for me. Gandalf moved his chair to the bedside and took a good look at Frodo. The color had come back to his face, and his eyes were clear and fully awake and aware. He was smiling, and there seemed to be little wrong with him, but to the wizard's eye there was a faint change, just a hint, as it were, of transparency about him, and especially about the left hand that lay outside upon the coverlet. Still, that must be expected, said Gandalf to himself. He is not half through yet. And to what he will come in the end, not even Elrond can foretell. Not to evil, I think. He may become like a glass filled with a clear light for eyes to see that can. You look splendid, he said aloud. I will risk a brief tale without consulting Elrond, but quite brief, mind you. And then you must sleep again. This is what happened, as far as I can gather. The riders made straight for you as soon as you fled. They did not need the guidance of their horses any longer. You had become visible to them, being already on the threshold of their world. And also the ring drew them. Your friends sprang aside off the road, or they would have been ridden down. They knew that nothing could save you, if the white horse could not. The riders were too swift to overtake, and too many to oppose. On foot, even Glorfindel and Aragorn together could not withstand all 9 at once. When the ring wraiths swept by, your friends ran up behind. Close to the ford there was a small hollow beside the road masked by a few stunted trees. There they hastily kindled fire, for Glorfindel knew that a flood would soon come down. If the riders tried to cross, and then he would have to deal with any that were left on his side of the river. The moment the flood appeared, he rushed out, followed by Aragorn and the others with flaming brands. Caught between fire and water, and seeing an elf lord revealed in his wrath, they were dismayed, and their horses were stricken with madness. 3 were carried away by the first assault of the flood. The others were now hurled into the water by their horses and overwhelmed. "And is that the end of the Black Riders?" asked Frodo. "No," said Gandalf. "Their horses must have perished, and without them they are crippled. But the ringwraiths themselves cannot be so easily destroyed. However, there is nothing more to fear from them at present. Your friends crossed after the flood had passed, and they found you lying on your face at the top of the bank, with a broken sword under you. The horse was standing guard beside you. You were pale and cold, and they feared that you were dead or worse. Elrond's folk met them, carrying you slowly towards Rivendell." "Who made the flood?" asked Frodo. "Elrond commanded it," answered Gandalf. "The river of this valley is under his power, and it will rise in anger when he has great need to bar the ford. As soon as the captain of the ringwraiths rode into the water, the flood was released. If I may say so, I added a few touches of my own. You may not have noticed, but some of the waves took the form of great white horses with shining white riders, and there were many rolling and grinding boulders. For a moment I was afraid that we had let loose too fierce a wrath, and the flood would get out of hand and wash you all away. There is great vigor in the waters that come down from the snows of the misty mountains." "Yes, it all comes back to me now," said Frodo. "The tremendous roaring. I thought I was drowning, with my friends and enemies and all, but now we are safe." Gandalf looked quickly at Frodo, but he had shut his eyes. "Yes, you are all safe for the present. Soon there will be feasting and merrymaking to celebrate the victory at the fort of Bruinen, and you will all be there in places of honor." "Splendid," said Frodo. "It is wonderful that Elrond and Glorfindel and such great lords, not to mention Strider, should take so much trouble and show me such kindness." "Well, there are many reasons why they should," said Gandalf, smiling. "I am one good reason. The ring is another. You are the ring bearer, and you are the heir of Bilbo, the ring finder." "Dear Bilbo," said Frodo deeply. "I wonder where he is. I wish he was here and could hear all about it. It would have made him laugh. The cow jumped over the moon, and the poor old troll." With that he fell fast asleep. Frodo was now safe in the last homely house east of the sea. That house was, as Bilbo had long ago reported, a perfect house, whether you liked food or sleep or storytelling or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear, and sadness. As the evening drew on, Frodo woke up again, and he found that he no longer felt in need of rest or sleep, but had a mind for food and drink, and probably for singing and storytelling afterwards. He got out of bed and discovered that his arm was already nearly as useful again as it ever had been. He found laid ready clean garments of green cloth that fitted him excellently. Looking in a mirror, he was startled to see how much thinner to see a much thinner reflection of himself than he remembered. It looked remarkably like the young nephew of Bilbo who used to go tramping with his uncle in the Shire. But the eyes looked out at him thoughtfully. "Yes, you have seen a thing or two since you last peeped out of a looking glass," he said to his reflection. "But now for a merry meeting." He stretched out his arms and whistled a tune. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Sam came in. He ran to Frodo and took his left hand awkwardly and shyly. He stroked it gently, and then he blushed and turned hastily away. "Hello, Sam," said Frodo. "It's warm," said Sam, "meeting your hand, Mr. Frodo. It has felt so cold through the long nights." "But glory and trumpets!" he cried, turning round again with shining eyes and dancing on the floor. "It's fine to see you up and yourself again, sir. Gandalf asked me to come and see if you were ready to come down, and I thought he was joking." "I am ready," said Frodo. "Let's go and look for the rest of the party." I can take you to them, sir," said Sam. "It's a big house, this, and very peculiar. Always a bit more to discover, and no knowing what you'll find round the corner. And elves, sir! Elves here and elves there. Some like kings, terrible and splendid, and some as merry as children. And the music and the singing, not that I have had time or the heart for much listening since we got here, but I'm getting to know some of the ways of the place." "I know what you have been doing, Sam," said Frodo, taking his arm, "but you shall be merry tonight, and listen to your heart's content. Come on, guide me around the corner. Guide me around the corners." Sam led him along several passages and down many steps, and out into a high garden above the steep bank of the river. He found his friend sitting in a porch on the side of the house looking east. Shadows had fallen in the valley below, but there was still a light on the faces of the mountains far above. The air was warm. The sound of running and falling water was loud, and the evening was filled with a faint scent of trees and flowers, as if summer still lingered in Elrond's gardens. "Hooray!" cried Pippin, springing up. "Here is our noble cousin. Make way for Frodo, Lord of the Ring." "Hush!" said Gandalf from the shadows at the back of the porch. "Evil things do not come into this valley, but all the same, we should not name them. The Lord of the Ring is not Frodo, but the master of the Dark Tower of Mordor, whose power is again stretching out over the world. We are sitting in a fortress. Outside, it is getting dark." "Gandalf has been saying many cheerful things like that," said Pippin. He thinks I need keeping in order, but it seems impossible somehow to feel gloomy or depressed in this place. I feel I could sing if I knew the right song for the occasion." "I feel like singing myself," laughed Frodo, "though at the moment I feel more like eating and drinking." "That will soon be cured," said Pippin. You have shown your usual cunning in getting up just in time for a meal." "More than a meal, a feast," said Merry. "As soon as Gandalf reported that you were recovered, the preparations began." He had hardly finished speaking when they were summoned to the hall by the ringing of many bells. The hall of Elrond's house was filled with folk, elves for the most part, though there were a few guests of other sorts. Elrond, as was his custom, sat in a great chair at the end of the long table upon the dais, and next to him on the other side sat Glorfindel. On the other side sat Gandalf. Frodo looked at them in wonder, for he had never before seen Elrond, of whom so many tales spoke. And as they sat upon his right hand and his left, Glorfindel and even Gandalf, whom he thought he knew so well, were revealed as lords of dignity and power. Gandalf was shorter in stature than the other two, but his long white hair, his sweeping silver beard, and his broad shoulders made him look like some wise king of ancient legend. In his aged face, under great snowy brows, his dark eyes were set like coals that could leap suddenly into fire. Glorfindel was tall and straight, his hair was of shining gold, his face fair and young and fearless and full of joy. His eyes were bright and keen, and his voice like music. On his brow sat wisdom, and in his hand was strength. The face of Elrond was ageless, neither old nor young, though in it was written the memory of many things, both glad and sorrowful. His hair was dark as the shadows of twilight, and upon it was set a circlet of silver. His eyes were gray as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of the stars. Venerable he seemed, as a king crowned with many winters, and yet hale as a tried warrior in the fullness of his strength. He was the lord of Rivendell, and mighty among both elves and men. In the middle of the table, against the woven cloths upon the wall, there was a chair under a canopy, and there sat a lady fair to look upon, and so like was she in form of womanhood to Elrond that Frodo guessed that she was one of his close kindred. Young she was, and yet not so. The braids of her dark hair were touched by no frost. Her white arms and clear face were flawless and smooth, and the light of stars was in her bright eyes, gray as a cloudless night. And yet queenly she looked, and thought and knowledge were in her glance, as if one who had known many things that the years bring. Above her brow, her head was covered with a cap of silver lace, netted with small gems, glittering white, but her soft gray raiment had no ornament save a girdle of leaves wrought in silver. So it was that Frodo saw her, whom few mortals had yet seen, Arwen, daughter of Elrond, in whom it was said that the likeness of Luthien had come on earth again. And she was called Undomiel, for she was the even star of her people. Long she had been in the lands of her mother's kin, on Lorien beyond the mountains, and was but lately returned to Rivendell, to her father's house. But her brothers, Elladan and Elrohir, were out upon errantry, for they rode often far afield with the rangers of the north, forgetting never their mother's torment in the dens of the orcs. Such loveliness in living thing Frodo had never seen before, nor imagined in his mind. He was both surprised and abashed to find that he had a seat at Elrond's table among all these folk so high and fair. Though he had a suitable chair, and he was raised up upon several cushions, he felt very small, and rather out of place, but that feeling quickly passed. The feast was merry, and the food all that his hunger could desire. It was some time before he looked about him again, or even turned to his neighbors. He looked first for his friends. Sam had begged to be allowed to wait on his master, but had been told that for this time he was a guest of honor. Frodo could see him now, sitting with Pippin and Merry at the upper end of one of the side tables, close to the dais. He could see no sign of Strider. Next to Frodo on his right sat a dwarf of important appearance, richly dressed. His beard, very long and forked, was white, nearly as white as the snow-white cloth of his garments. He wore a silver belt, and round his neck hung a chain of silver and diamonds. Frodo stopped eating to look at him. "Welcome and well met," said the dwarf, turning towards him. Then he actually rose from his seat and bowed. "Gloin, at your service," he said, and bowed still lower. "Frodo Baggins at your service, and your family," said Frodo correctly, rising in surprise and scattering his cushions. "Am I right in guessing that you are the Gloin, one of the 12 companions of the great Thorin Oakenshield?" "Quite right," answered the dwarf, gathering up the cushions and courteously assisting Frodo back into his seat. "And I do not ask, for I have already been told that you are the kinsman and adopted heir of our friend Bilbo the Renowned. Allow me to congratulate you on your recovery." "Thank you very much," said Frodo. "You have had some very strange adventures, I hear," said Gloin. "I wonder greatly what brings 4 hobbits on so long a journey. Nothing like it has happened since Bilbo came with us. But perhaps I should not inquire too closely, since Elrond and Gandalf do not seem disposed to talk of this." "I think we will not speak of it, at least not yet," said Frodo politely. He guessed that even in Elrond's house, the matter of the ring was not one for casual talk, and in any case, he wished to forget his troubles for a time. But I am equally curious, he added, to learn what brings so important a dwarf so far from the lonely mountain. Gloin looked at him. If you have not heard, I think we will not speak yet of that either. Master Elrond will summon us all ere long, I believe, and then we shall all hear many things. But there is much else that may be told. Throughout the rest of the meal they talked together, but Frodo listened more than he spoke, for the news of the Shire, apart from the ring, seemed small and far away and unimportant, while Gloin had much to tell of events in the northern regions of Wilderland. Frodo learned that Grimbeorn the Old, son of Beorn, was now the lord of many sturdy men, and to their land between the mountains and Mirkwood neither orc nor wolf dared to go. Indeed, said Gloin, if it were not for the Beornings, the passage from Dale to Rivendell would long ago have become impossible. They are valiant men, and keep open the high pass and the ford of Carrock. But their tolls are high, he added with a shake of his head. And like Beorn of old, they are not over fond of dwarves. Still, they are trusty, and that is much in these days. Nowhere are there any men so friendly to us as the men of Dale. They are good folk, the Bardings. The grandson of Bard, the bowman, rules them. Brand, son of Bane, son of Bard. He is a strong king, and his realm now reaches far south and east of Esgaroth. And what of your own people? Asked Frodo. There is much to tell, good and bad, said Gloin. Yet it is mostly good. We have so far been fortunate, though we do not escape the shadow of these times. If you really wish to hear of us, I will tell you tidings gladly, but stop me when you are weary. Dwarves' tongues run on when speaking of their handiwork, they say. And with that, Gloin embarked on a long account of the doings of the Dwarf Kingdom. He was delighted to have found so polite a listener, for Frodo showed no sign of weariness and made no attempt to change the subject, though actually he soon got rather lost among the strange names of people and places that he had never heard of before. He was interested, however, to hear that Dain was still king under the mountain, and was now old, having passed his 250th year, venerable and fabulously rich. Of the 10 companions who had survived the Battle of 5 Armies, 7 were still with him: Dwalin, Gloin, Dori, Nori, Bifor, Bofor, and Bombor. Bombor was now so fat that he could not move himself from his couch to his chair at table, and it took 6 young dwarves to lift him. And what has become of Balin and Ori and Oin? Asked Frodo. A shadow passed over Gloin's face. We do not know, he answered. It is largely on account of Balin that I have come to ask the advice of those who dwell in Rivendell. But tonight, let us speak of merrier things. Gloin began then to talk of the works of his people, telling Frodo about their great labors in Dale and under the mountain. We have done well, he said, but in metal work we cannot rival our fathers, many of whose secrets are lost. We make good armor and keen swords, but we cannot again make mail or blade to match those that were made before the dragon came. Only in mining and building have we surpassed the old days. You should see the waterways of Dale, Frodo, and the fountains and the pools. You should see the stone-paved roads of many colors, and the halls and cavernous streets under the earth with arches carved like trees, and the terraces and towers upon the mountain sides. Then you would see that we have not been idle. I will come and see them if ever I can, said Frodo. How surprised Bilbo would have been to see all the changes in the desolation of Smaug. Gloin looked at Frodo and smiled. You were very fond of Bilbo, were you not? He asked. Yes, answered Frodo. I would rather see him than all the towers and palaces in the world. All right, kiddos, we're going to stop there. I love you always and forever, no matter what.